sometimes controversial, always politically incorrect, and pro-life without exception, without compromise, and without apology. It's the Pro-Life America podcast with your hosts, Sarah Waits and the president of Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Pro-Life America podcast. This is Mark Crutcher's daughter, Sheila Crutcher, and joining me is host Sarah Waits. Hey,
hello,
Sarah.
everyone. Before we get started today, I want to do a brief announcement. So for those who listen to the podcast on YouTube, you may have noticed that we have been a little bit slower to upload episodes last week to the YouTube channel. And the reason is, as time goes on, we have been encountering more and more problems with YouTube.
Of course.
Surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. In fact, just the other day, episode 92, which was about abortion coercion, was pulled from YouTube. Do you want to know why YouTube found this so scandalous that they had to pull it?
No telling what stupid reason they gave.
So apparently, us raising awareness about abortion coercion and tips for women what to do and how to deal with abortion coercion, they said that violates their medical misinformation policy. They say that YouTube does not allow content about abortion that contradicts expert consensus from local health authorities or the World Health Organization.
Well, the experts are probably people from Planned Parenthood in the first place.
And poses a serious risk of bodily harm or death. You know, this just proves that they don't care anything about women.
No.
I mean, we have even on tape from these abortion conferences that National Abortion Federation, all these people go to, where they admit that abortion coercion is a problem.
Right.
And they just don't care.
Anything that shows that abortion is bad is so-called misinformation. And so they just decide to pull it.
And I'm sorry, I'm not going to let the World Health Organization, whose main response is to push abortion on countries that they feel are impoverished and just needs a little abortion to help them.
Sorry if we're not going to take our advice from the eugenics WHO.
Exactly. So if you were looking for episode 92, that's what happened. Well, Sheila, can you believe that it's already been a year since Roe versus Wade was overturned?
I mean, yes, it's not
on your birthday.
It happened on my birthday. Birthday is June 24th. And so not only was it my birthday, but the 1-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And a lot has gone on in the abortion issue.
And we got asked recently where the abortion battle is right now and kind of where it's headed. And of course, I am not going to purport myself to be as insightful or wise as Mark. Some of the things we're going to talk about in here is stuff that he's talked about.
Right. And stuff that he even said before it was overturned. Stuff that he said would be happening. And, you know, some people heeded his advice and stuff, and others just completely went in one ear and out the other. So,
and Mark would stress this, but the long and the short of it is that overturning Roe was not the end for us. It just changed the way that we fight this battle. And since Roe versus Wade was overturned, I have seen a number of articles coming out. I want to say this is by well-meaning pro-lifers who are talking about the state abortion bans that have kicked in and how the abortion rates have dropped. And I want everybody to take this with a grain of salt. I know it's really tempting to celebrate, but we have to be realistic about it because otherwise, how can we effectively save babies if we're not being realistic about it?
Right.
And the thing is, we don't honestly know
the true
number of abortions that are happening and the true reduction rate that the state bans have put in. Because as it is now, and Mark was quick to point this out, overturning Roe does not ban abortion in the United States.
It doesn't end it fully.
All it does is it sends it back to the states. And of course, as what we have now is what Mark would always call a patchwork quilt of laws, right? So every state, even some municipalities, have their own different abortion laws.
Right.
And people can freely drive from one state to another.
Which means that no baby is safe from abortion.
Yeah, until the time comes where we have a personhood ruling and abortion is illegal throughout the entire United States, no baby is truly safe.
Right.
And people look at the abortion surveillance reports from the CDC, and they're quick to just lap everything up as fact. But the reality is, abortion statistics in the United States by the CDC, they are reported on voluntarily by the states.
Right.
And of course, each state has their own methods for how they record and how they collect that data.
So even those numbers might not be accurate.
Absolutely. And there are a number of states that have not reported or even recorded abortion statistics in years.
Right.
Including the big state of California.
Where abortion is fully endorsed.
The Guttmacher Institute, which has ties to Planned Parenthood, they compile their own data. Of course, their last published data is from 2020. And according to Politico, Guttmacher surveys every known abortion provider, including clinics, hospitals, and doctor's office, and, this is the important deal, supplements the tally with government data and estimates.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? Do they pad the numbers? Do they look for cross-reporting and say, okay, this was reported twice? I mean, what is the supplementing that they do?
And where is the supplemental data coming from in the first place?
On top of all that, Guttmacher plans to change its methodology for counting abortions. And instead, what they're going to do in the future is, instead of surveying every abortion provider nationwide, it's going to draw random monthly samples of providers to build a statistical model. So in other words, they're just going to cherry pick from different areas.
And the thing is, right now, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, things are constantly changing in each state. I mean, it's going back and forth. And so if they're planning on doing that monthly, things can change day by day. So that doesn't give a good representation of what is truly happening.
So there is actually a new group on the scene that's now trying to collect abortion statistics. They are the Society of Family Planning, which is a pro-choice organization, quote, nonprofit. And they're trying to collect abortion statistics to the point that this nonprofit is paying abortion providers to respond. I can't imagine how that would bias responses at all.
Right.
All of this shows that really you cannot tell from these statistics how many abortions are done. Absolutely.
No, and I mean, and even changes from state to state, because with the abortion bans in Texas, we, have heard that, oh yes, abortions have drastically decreased. Whereas, for example, in other states, it's probably increased.
It's good that you're mentioning that. There was an article from the New York Times that came out in March of this year. And it talks about 2 new studies that have come out that have looked at what the Texas ban did to the abortion rate. Because again, we saw people on the conservative side who were like, oh, this is reducing our abortion rate. The 2 studies suggest that the total number among Texas women fell by far less than anybody was reporting, only around 10%, because of the increases of women in Texas who traveled to a nearby state to get an abortion or ordered abortion pills online.
Again, it really just depends on state by state. There was a Seattle Times article talking about Washington State versus Idaho. And abortion clinics from the Pacific Northwest region have started sharing data showing that there was an increase in clients from Idaho to like Washington State and those states. So while it's keeping some women from getting abortions, it looks like some are simply traveling. And I imagine the distance probably has a big factor, like the distance of travel.
I think there's been some stuff that's looked at, like the farther away an abortion clinic is, the less likely people are to make the journey. And I'm sure income probably has something to do a little bit about that. But like we say, as long as abortion remains legal anywhere in the United States, no baby is truly safe. There's always that option. Now, we have to take the abortion industry saying, oh, we're getting, million times influx of women with a grain of salt, because of course they want to promote that message. But my point to people who are listening to this is you really have to take all of this with a grain of salt.
While it may decrease some abortions, it's certainly going to increase some in other states as well.
And I think one of the things that's important, and as we've talked about probably a whole bunch of times recently about the future of this battle, is the chemical abortions. in this article that talks about the ways Texas women were getting abortions, it said that an average of 1,100 women ordered abortion pills online each month from Aid Access, which is an overseas service, more than triple the number who ordered pills in an average month before the Texas ban kicked in. So that's why you're seeing all these telehealth, Planned Parenthood getting involved in the telehealth and abortion pills and chemical abortion, ramping that up. Also, probably why the Biden administration was it July, put in that mandate that pharmacies had to carry abortion-inducing drugs. Right? Well, now the state of Texas, as well as Mayo Pharmacy, is suing the Biden administration over that mandate, saying that it violates religious faith of these organizations.
Yeah, if they have to provide abortion pills by the federal government, it of course would violate their religious beliefs. And speaking of, the left and abortion rights activists are now using religious freedom arguments to challenge abortion bans now in the states. There's an article from the New York Times talking about how there have been 15 lawsuits in 8 different states saying that abortion bans and restrictions infringe on their faiths, and the faiths include so-called Jewish and Christian denominations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is not entirely surprising. One of the big players in the pro-choice movement is, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a religious organization. It is for clergy who support abortion.
And there's Catholics for Choice, and there's like Jewish, pro-choice organization. And so now they're saying, hey, let's use the rights of religious freedom and turn that back on them. And so that's what they're doing with their lawsuits. They're also saying that these bans are infringing on the separation of church and state as well.
How do they feel like it's the separation of church and state? Because I feel like liberals use this and they say, okay, well, the separation of church and state. The state cannot impose a mandated religion among the people, but you are not free from there being influences of religion around you.
Well, they're saying that it's infringing on the separation of church and state because the state is telling you how you can't follow or practice your religion.
To some degree, we do that. For example, if you are somebody who believes that your religion requires 15 wives, that's not legal. States and the government will not allow it. If your religion calls for sacrificing of people on an altar, we don't allow that either.
I was going to say religious freedom still doesn't allow for the killing of human beings. I mean, that's murder and it's against the law.
Well, let's not be fooled here. I mean, their arguments really have nothing to do with faith.
These people are just using this as an excuse.
Exactly. They're using an excuse. In the end, it's just about trying to justify their actions. Speaking of justifying actions, last week, and this is not the first case that we have seen a number of instances of pro-choice violence in the recent weeks. In fact, we also run a website called People of Choice, and it feels like most of the posts that I've been making on there recently have been about pro-choice violence. But anyway, last week, a pro-life activist and sidewalk counselor in Michigan was run over twice by abortionist Theodore Rommel. According to the activist, he said he was standing in the driveway and the abortionist ran over his leg using his vehicle, he said. And then he had to reverse to get off my leg. So he ran over me twice. Afterwards, Rommel got out of the car and laughed at the pro-life activist as he was laying on the ground, while sane people were calling 911. At this moment, there is no word if the abortionist will face charges for assaulting the pro-lifer.
Well, of course not, because it's a double standard.
Yeah, it is absolutely a double standard, because if the roles were reversed, you know absolutely that the federal government will be charging this pro-life activist with the FACE Act and going after him, maybe a SWAT team, like is the case with Mark Hawk, right?
It would be all over national news.
All over national news. As it is, the news is not covering it. The pro-life activist is going to have surgery to have a rod put in his tibia with pins and screws. And this is not the first time that this abortionist has done this. In 2012, he ran over Lynn Mills. She's the director of Pro-Life Michigan. And he was arrested and charged with assault at that point and placed on probation for 6 months. Which, if you think about it, how many people normally run over somebody and get probation for 6 months?
Yeah. It just shows how biased they are towards abortion.
And like I said, this is not the only thing that's happened within the last few weeks. There's been other things that have happened. And what's not even talking about how a bunch of crisis pregnancy centers, since Roe was overturned, were firebombed.
Well, they always talk about violence against abortionists. They never talk about violence against pro-lifers.
Something else has come out, and it's probably just the beginnings of this, but this is important. Because, as we've talked about on this podcast, the abortion industry has had a hard time recruiting doctors to do abortions. Probably the people that have the most bias and the lowest opinion of abortionists are people within the medical community.
Oh, yeah. The medical community overall hates abortionists. It makes abortionists make them look bad. They know what abortion is.
I've seen even articles by pro-choice doctors commenting about women coming in after a botched abortion and the injuries that they have. And these pro-choice doctors are saying these people are the lowest of the low of the medical community.
Others in the medical community often have to clean up after abortionists.
And so they're not getting the replacement numbers that they need for abortionists. In Pennsylvania, there are people in the medical community, not necessarily doctors, but people in the health field who are pushing right now, pushing for legislation to come out to allow non-doctors to do abortions. And make no mistake, it's not about caring for women. It's not about the influx of people that they think they're going to see. It's about, we want to be able to have anybody do abortions because we cannot get people to do them.
Right. And different states have talked about doing this in the past. And I mean, even with an abortionist, a trained doctor, there's risk when you're performing abortion.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Now they want just anybody in the medical industry to be able to perform abortion.
Right now, about 20 states allow quote, quote, non-physician health workers to provide abortion in some form or fashion. And it was actually interesting. Right now, I'm uploading our Project Choice project that we did a long time ago, back in 1993, to the website. There's a question in there asking people in the abortion industry if they think non-doctors should be able to do abortions. What do you think the response was? I'm not talking about what they would tell the media. I'm talking about what they would say to each other in private.
If they're being honest, they would say no because they know the risk.
So these abortionists that we surveyed believe that we were pro-choice and a pro-choice organization who is trying to collect research on the life of an abortionist. They overwhelmingly stated no. And that just goes to show you that even people within the abortion industry, if they're being completely honest, do not find this to be a good idea.
No, I mean, it's unsafe with people that are even trained.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just one of the battles going forward after the overturning of Roe versus Wade with the ban. But the thing that we need to focus on and that we've always needed in order to make sure that every baby is safe from abortion is the personhood amendment.
Absolutely.
And the abortion, side sees that. In an article in The Nation, the anti-abortion movement gets a dose of post-Roe reality. They talk about a lot of different things, but at the very end, they talk about personhood. They say that they believe that the overturning of Roe versus Wade was just part of a multi-front strategy, which we've always said it is. And so they're correct about that. And they believe that next is persuading the Supreme Court on a personhood, but they don't believe that that will happen anytime soon. Well, Mary Zilger, a law professor at the University of California, stated, if the people in the anti-abortion movement are saying it took us 50 years to get rid of Roe, and we're willing to spend the next 50 years on personhood, then you can never say never. And what I want to say is that, yes, our goal has always been personhood. That is how we guarantee the end of abortion and the safety of babies. But let's not make it take 50 years.
No.
Our goal wasn't for it to take 50 years for the overturning of Roe versus Wade. We're trying to stop abortion as immediately as we can That way more babies are saved from the clutches of abortion.
I will say, on the other hand, though, that I know things that sometimes can take longer than we wish. And it's easy to get discouraged. And my response to that is to be like water. And I know that sounds completely nuts. But when you think about it, it moves around obstacles and it erodes things in its path if it's just given enough time. You just got to be like water. Just persevere and you will get somewhere.
I think that what we can take from this law professor's quote is that not the amount of time, but the fact that perseverance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It will happen.
They thought we would go away by now, that we would just quietly sit down and be like,
Which is important. We can't give up now just because Roe versus Wade is overturned. We have to reach personhood.
Roe versus Wade being overturned was not the end. I know some people were, because they are tired and they're tired of hearing about abortion. It's easy to be like, okay, well, it's illegal in my state. I'm willing to sit down.
Right.
But here's the thing. Like we just talked about for a whole bunch of time during this episode, no baby in your state is truly safe.
Right. And it's something that my dad has talked about before. And it's actually the quote that I want to share today from the mouth of Mark. His article, The Supreme Court Leak, an Overturning Roe Reality Check, talks about this very thing. And this is what he said. He said, the important thing to remember is that the overturn of Roe is a great victory for the pro-life movement. But all it really does is change the nature of the battle and the environment in which it is fought. What doesn't change is that it is a battle we could still lose.
Absolutely.
And so
and the day we stop fighting is the day that we lose.
Exactly. And the day that abortion is unrestricted.
And we have a great little tract called The Pact. And it's on our website. You can get the digital version for free, or you can get a single printed copy for free. And in there, it talks about what the United States would look like had the pro-life movement never existed. And never doubt that even the small things that you're doing has a profound impact. When you as a pro-lifer think, what have I done? What little have I done? What impact have I had? And we've been fighting all these years and abortion is still legal. When you think all these things, read this book.
Yeah, exactly. Keep on going. And until next time, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight.
We're here to win.
Because winning is how the killing stops.
We'll see you next week, guys. Bye.